Welcome to Bedtime FairyFails. I'm Kim. This episode was made possible in part by the live play D&D podcast All D20. We'll tell you a little more about them after the show. Our first story tonight was sent in by Grant Goldsmith from Iowa. This is a story about how sometimes it really is all about the journey. This is Curse That Dragon. Once upon a time, a group of heroes were on a mission to kill an adult white dragon. This dragon had been eating all of a town's livestock, and they were willing to pay to have their problem taken care of. If you know what I mean. The group accepted the mission, which promptly self-destructed, and set off to gear up for the fight. Let me introduce our heroes. First, we have a wizard named Manistrad, a cleric named Damon, a rogue named Janice, and a bard named Avery. Now, our heroes knew they would need some kind of boost in order to defeat this dragon, so they head out to a nearby hidden dwarf base deep in the mountains. They made some small talk with a few of the dwarves while exploring and filled them in on what they were doing. The dwarves suggested the heroes speak with their king, as he might be able to help. For a favor, of course. So the heroes head on inside to talk with him.
"Welcome, friends!"
exclaimed the dwarven king.
"I hear we are in a position to help each other out,"
he says happily. The party concurs and explains that they're looking for gear to help them defeat a dragon. The king replies,
"Well, I happen to know of a legendary tomb that supposedly houses some magic weapons. I'll tell you where it is if you can help out with our mimic problem."
Janice looks at the king skeptically and says,
"So, there are definitely magic weapons? Or you just think there are magic weapons?"
"The legend definitely says there are magic weapons,"
replies the king.
But that doesn't really answer my...
"So, do we have a deal?"
Janice sighs as the rest of the party agrees. The king directs them to the wine/mead room where one of the barrels is actually a mimic. Now, in case you've never encountered one, a mimic is a monster that can take on the appearance of virtually any object. As long as it remains still, it's completely impossible to identify it as a mimic. When the group reaches the room, there are 4 totally normal-looking barrels, and conveniently, there are 4 of our heroes. So each hero takes a barrel and simultaneously strikes them. Damon the cleric had the mimic barrel, and it attacks. The heroes fight bravely against the mimic, ultimately coming out victorious. They return to the king, get the coordinates to the tomb, and head out to find their gear. When they get to the tomb, they find multiple tombs, each housing a legendary hero. Manistrad, being a wizard, naturally chooses the tomb of a legendary wizard. Inside, he finds a necklace of fireballs, which is a necklace with beads on it that you can pull off and throw to make a pretty powerful fireball wherever it lands. Sounds pretty useful for a dragon fight. So the group heads out for their trek back to the dragon. After a full week of traveling, they finally reach the base at the edge of a giant frozen lake. This is where the dragon lives. They creep inside only to find 2 bounty hunters. They were here to slay the dragon and collect the reward money. Avery the bard says,
"Oh, neat. So are we."
The bounty hunters, being none too keen on sharing the reward money, attack the adventurers. Everyone grabs their weapons and prepares to fight. Janice the rogue takes a few arrows to the gut but keeps on fighting, stabbing and loosing arrows like the wind. Avery is in the middle of a particularly hurtful, vicious mockery when 2 more bounty hunters burst through the door to join the fight. Now it was 4 on 4. Almost. Damon the cleric, for some reason, decides to stand in the corner, healing only himself the whole time, for no apparent reason, as the bounty hunters continuously miss him. Manistrad notices this between blows from two of the bad guys who are just pummeling him to bits.
Seriously, Damon!
Yells Manistrad over the sound of Janice having a spear driven through her.
You guys are doing great. Keep up the good work, fellas.
Replies Damon before healing himself. Again. Eventually, despite Damon's effing participation, the group is victorious. They've defeated the bounty hunters. Except now, 3 out of 4 of them are badly wounded. So naturally, they do the responsible thing and head out to take a rest before facing a dragon. Just kidding, they proceed on in half dead. They climb the tower and followed a bridge out to a different part of the abandoned base. They could see the dragon resting on the roof. Avery yells a curse at it with vicious mockery to lure it down to them.
Hey, dragon! You!
The dragon awakens, and the heroes prepare for one last battle. Immediately, the dragon uses its icy breath on Damon the cleric, because Karma's a bitch, and he is left very bloodied and in very rough shape. Now Manistrad knows without their healer, they don't stand a chance. He needed to do something to save the rest of his party, and he knows what needs to be done. Manistrad screams at the dragon, drawing its attention, and runs straight towards it. He grabs his necklace of fireballs, clutches it in his fist, and leaps at the dragon's head. The rest of the party watches in horror as the smoke clears. All that's left is the bloody stump where the dragon's head had been. The rest of the body falls sideways off the tower, plunging down to the icy lake below. On the ground were the charred remains of Manistrad's body. The rest of the party hold a funeral for the wizard and reminisce about old times and the irony of spending months gearing up for this fight, only to beat the dragon in less than a minute. The end. Our second story tonight comes from Camille Osborne, who is an amazing DM to her players Kai, Maggie, Sarah, Ben, and Kobe, who together created this epic tale about a doomsday device, some pretty intense psychoanalyzing, and a very important donut. This is Sadness and Sweets. Once upon a time, there was a very unique group of heroes. This story actually comes from the RPG Monster of the Week, so their characters are a little different than what we're used to, which means I'm going to do something a little out of the norm and explain what their classes are. Their party consisted of Griffin, the pararomantic, and a human. The pararomantic is basically a human who, through a romantic attachment to a magical creature, is able to take on some of the abilities from their lover. Kara, the constructed, is a robot. The constructed is something that was created and somehow gained sentience and has a desire to have a purpose. Shane, the summoned, is also a human. The summoned is basically a tank of a person, and their existence is a harbinger of the apocalypse, so their purpose is to prevent it from happening. Conrad, the meddling kid, another human. Basically, an extremely smart kid who is a bit skeptical about the existence of monsters. He has no magic powers, but has a lot of gear and is very techy. And finally we have Sophocles, the monstrous, and a centaur. Kind of. Sophocles was born with the head and body of a horse, instead of the normal centaur with the head and torso of a human. So, essentially, Sophocles is just a talking horse. The monstrous is an inhumane creature or person that has been tasked by a dark master to bring humanity down, but usually decides not to. Also, one last important note for later in the story, so I don't have to interrupt an emotional monologue. A selkie is a fae person who can take on the form of either a human or a seal, and are often distrusting of humans. That'll be important later. Now, our heroes had been tracking down a villain named Vanya, and Vanya had created an apocalypse/mass mind control machine. The heroes knew she had to be stopped and headed out to her bad guy lair for an epic final boss fight. When they get there, they find Vanya standing in front of her machine with a crazed look in her eyes. She yells at them that they're too late and to get out.
As soon as the timer hits 0, the whole world will follow me. Everyone will love me for the rest of forever.
While everyone else prepares for battle, Griffin steps forward.
Vanya, why are you doing this? Why do you feel like you need everyone's love?
Vanya is taken aback. No one had ever asked her why she was evil before. Suddenly, the group experiences a magical flashback into Vanya's childhood. Growing up, Vanya was the only one in town with magic, and everyone could sense it. She was treated as a freak and an outcast. She had no friends except for her sister. Her sister was the only person in Vanya's entire life who had ever accepted her. It was Vanya's sister who gave her the courage to finally show her family the magic powers she possessed. But that's when everything went wrong. After revealing her powers, Vanya's family turned on her. They attacked Vanya, and in an attempt to defend herself, she unintentionally strikes her sister, killing the only person who had ever really loved her. The group is stunned at what they've just seen. Vanya yells at them.
I'm a monster. Everyone knows it. I've just embraced it. So with this machine, I'll finally have the love and loyalty of the entire world.
Griffin steps forward again and says,
Vanya, listen. The love you'll get from this machine won't be real. You're just manipulating people. That's not love.
I don't care.
She yells back at him.
This is the only option I have. The world will be much better once I'm in charge. You wouldn't understand.
Griffin replies,
Actually, I do understand. I know what it feels like to be shunned. You see, I was once in love. She was a Selkie, and none of the other Selkies approved of our love simply because I'm human. I wasn't the monster they portrayed me to be, and neither are you. This mind control love isn't the answer. It's never going to feel real, and it won't make you feel the love you desire so much.
By the end of his speech, Vanya has tears welling up in her eyes.
This is who I am.
She cried.
I'm a villain, and that's all I'll ever be.
Vanya,
replied Griffin.
Your sister loves you. She accepted you and your magic. What happened was an accident. You don't have to be a monster.
Vanya immediately begins sobbing, turns away from the group, and vanishes in a puff of smoke. The heroes look around for her, but find nothing. She was just gone. Conrad looks at Griffin and says,
Nice going, Griffin. You psychoanalyzed away the only person who could stop the machine.
You see, there was a shield around the machine that only Vanya could pass through. That's when Kara remembers that she can basically shapeshift and chimes in with,
Wait, I can just make myself look like her and walk right through it.
and that's exactly what she did. Kara, now disguised as Vanya, walks through the shield and disables it. Next, she tries to shut down the machine, but hears those dreaded words. Password required. Now what? They have no way of shutting down the machine, and time is running out. This seems like a good time to tell you about Sophocles' regenerating donut. A few weeks before the encounter, the party had met a fairy queen. She took a liking to the adventurers and offered each of them a gift. And what does Sophocles, the talking horse, ask for? That's right, a regenerating donut. An option I highly approve of. Now, not only did this provide Sophocles with a tasty snack, but if he tears off a chunk of said donut, it grows a whole new donut. Sophocles walks up to the machine, pulls out his donut, and says,
Don't worry, guys. I got this.
He then starts pulling chunks of his donut off and shoving it into every empty space he could find on the machine. As the donuts grow back, it begins to slowly clog up. That's when Kara steps in and animates the donut, causing it to actively try to destroy the machine. So here we have a talking horse shoving pieces of donut into a doomsday machine, and every new donut that grows back is trying to destroy the machine. They keep shoving more and more donuts in until finally the doomsday device completely implodes. About the time the machine is suffering donut-strophic failure, Vanya reappears. She had managed to recompose herself, but upon seeing the machine, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Griffin puts his hand on her shoulder and says,
You know, you really don't have to be like this. You'd be amazed at what a good therapist could do for you. And I'll be here to support you every step of the way.
Vanya looks up at him and says, You really think so?
I do.
Replies Griffin. In the end, Vanya agrees to go to therapy and to use her magic to try and make amends for what she's done. Sophocles, however, looks forlorn. So Kara asks,
What's wrong, Sophocles? We beat the machine and the bad guy with absolutely none of the combat that had been carefully planned out for us.
Sophocles replies,
Yeah, but I never even got to taste my donut.
Shane pats him on the back and says,
Don't worry, bud. I have a feeling it'll all work out.
and turns out Shane was right. And the Fairy Queen eventually replaced his donut with a regenerating eclair. The end. Thanks for listening. If you like D&D podcasts, which clearly you do, be sure to check out one of our favorites, All D20. You can find them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen. To submit a fail, email me at bedtimefairyfails@gmail.com or message me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Bedtime Fairy Fails and Twitter as BT FairyFails.